G'day everyone, welcome back to another weekly tipping video on the channel. You're here for my round 10 AFL tips of the 2023 AFL season. If you're going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, that'd be much appreciated. And let's kick it off with my tips from last week. Okay everyone, my tips from round 9, I managed to get a 7 out of 9. Not bad, continuing the consistency, however, of pretty high scores or reasonable scores. Definitely could have been better, but could have been a lot worse. Started with tipping off the Cats. I felt bullish about the Tigers though in last week's video, but I just still stick with Geelong. Probably should have looked more into their outs with Dangerfield and all that, etc. as the Tigers played sort of to their old brand, got a really big win on Friday night. Tipped the Suns away against the Eagles, pretty self-explanatory tipped. To be honest, I was very confident against Fremantle. I thought the Swans would get the job done, but they just simply did not. They're very inconsistent with their method and their contested game, as the Dockers got a famous win. Really big win on the road. All their tools got to work. Pretty self-explanatory tip with Port Adelaide winning big away at Hobart. Again, another easy one with the Demons winning at the MCG against the Hawks. Then a home game, I thought this would be a bit of a danger game for the Lions. I still backed them in quite with some sort of confidence, but I felt the Dons would be close, and they were leading throughout some stages of the game. I think at half-time they were only down by a few. At quarter-time I think they were leading, but yeah, the Lions just flexed their muscles and won by a convincing margin. This is probably a bit of a 50-50 game. Saw a lot of people tip the Blues here, but I just couldn't tip Carlton at the moment. I backed in the Bulldogs form. They've been playing some good footy, and it was a really good game. And overall, they did play some good footy on Saturday night. Then the Sunday games, tipped Adelaide with somewhat confidence. I felt this game could be pretty close, but I just can't go past Adelaide's forward half at the moment. It is clicking, and another pretty easy tip with the Pies, getting the job done massively over the Giants. So 7 out of 9 for round 9. Hopefully we can make a even better score in round 10. So just a blink of an eye later, here we are at round 10. I cannot believe how quick this season has gone. Felt like yesterday we started off with round 1, but round 10, here we are. First game we've got on is a big one here. Port Adelaide versus the Demons at Adelaide Oval, 7:50 p.m. Always a pretty decent matchup, this one. I feel like when Port Adelaide play home against some pretty top teams for the past few years, you don't know what to expect. You're either expecting Port Adelaide to really turn it up, get a good win, but then you can have performances where they just shit the bed and lose by 50 points, and it turns out to be a shite game. Feels like it's one or the other, really. So I feel like either the Demons win big or Port Adelaide win by a nice, comfortable margin. I don't think this will be close. Port Adelaide have been heavily under the radar so far this year. This is probably because they haven't been the most sexiest team on paper. They haven't shown really the most dominating numbers, but just their scoring, off the turnover, they're a very deadly team off that. And they don't really play too much of a flashy style as well. They play that sort of heavily contested style. They just get the ball forward down there. And they're one of the highest ranked teams in score launches so far this year. So that means usually off an intercept possession or off a turnover, they do usually execute and hit up a target inside 50 and do score. It's going to be a pretty tough test against the Demons though. They are pretty much flying so far this year. There are those few people though that have said, yeah, the Demons probably aren't going as well as what people think. Maybe I agree to that with an extent. I don't think their forward half and probably their form isn't the most perfect in the moment, the Demons, but they're just getting the job done. They're getting wins. That's exactly what they need. Should be a pretty contested heavy game here. Two midfields that do boast a lot of contested talent. Ollie Wines in there. Travis Boak, as of late, has been in some quite decent form, but then you've got Butters, who's been sensational the past 2 weeks. Rosie in there too. And Clayton Oliver Petrarca is a big question mark though. He might not be playing this game on Friday night. The big one though, where it does favour the Demons, is just the tools matchups. I know Harry Petty's out, but usually an undersized defensive Port Adelaide, that's what they usually run with. You've got Grundy and Gawn down there. One or the other, they're easily going to be making a force down forward, and especially in the ruck where 𝐼𝐶𝐞 is getting dominated at the moment. So you feel in that sort of department they can win. Might be a bit of a risky one, but I am really liking Port Adelaide here. The past few weeks, they've won 5 in a row. They've honestly been playing some fantastic footy. And you know what? I might back them at home. I don't think it's necessarily a huge upset if they win. They do have the home field advantage. But as I did say earlier, I think this is a sort of a game where Port Adelaide could win by maybe 15 or 20 or so points, get a really big statement win, or they can just shit the bed and the Demons dominate them and win by 30 plus. I feel like it's one of those two games, but really liking Port Adelaide at the moment. They're a very under the radar side. I think they get this done against the Demons, and they really prove it to the comp that, hey, we are the 4th best team in the comp, or maybe even better, because we are still undecided who is the 4th best team in the comp at the moment. But Port Adelaide, I think they get a statement win. Liking the way they're playing at the moment. They get the job done over the Demons, and they'll win this one by 16 points. Now for the Saturday games, first one up here, North Melbourne taking on the Swans at Marvel Stadium. Well, two teams that are horrifically out of form. You look at North Melbourne, they are looking like a VFL quality side at the moment. I think they have about 6 forced changes. Heading into this weekend, I don't think there's no 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐪, there's no Flynn Perez, there's no 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐷𝐿, there's no Jack Marnie. Aiden Call's out suspended, and they're now facing a Sydney side. Yes, they are out of form, the Swans, but surely you don't think they can drop this game. To be honest, with how North Melbourne is playing, they are so poor in pressure. They just miss a lot of tackles. A very unaccountable side at the moment, and that's pretty, not good enough, I don't think. Especially with Alistair Clarkson on the helm, you feel like they do pick up a bit more competitiveness. I thought their game against St Kilda was quite good, was pretty competitive in that sort of aspect. So you feel like with this game again back home at Marvel, they do sort of turn up for this game. Against the Swans that, yes, I've said just then, terribly out of form. They are being very inconsistent with their contested game. They've been playing some awful footy. They're just a team that's really out of confidence. And look, $6 odds for North. Maybe some people bold to tip them here, but I don't think the Swans are this bad to lose to North. Right? But jokes aside, fellas, I think the Swans get this done. I was confident against Freo last week. I think they are good enough to win this game here. They should have a few changes. I know McDonald and Mills are big outs, but it's a chance for 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐷𝐿. Stevens probably comes back on the side. Wardlaw, good debut for North. I do think North actually turn up for this game. I feel like they'll play a bit more competitive. But the Swans here, they're eyeing this game as a must-win. I think they get their confidence off this game against, the Kangaroos are just terribly out of form. I can't really see them winning this. We'll go Swans to pick up a much-needed win, and they'll win by 26 points. Next game up here, we've got a really good matchup here. The Bulldogs versus the Crows at Mars Stadium, so the annual game in Ballarat for the Bulldogs. This game last year, I think the Crows won by 1 point, and this is when they weren't as good as this year, so you feel like they probably have the wood over the Bulldogs, maybe as of late. Venue aside, both teams are in some really good form. I'm liking how both these sides are going. The Bulldogs midfield is like a well-oiled machine at the moment. They've been very good in the clearances. I thought their game last week against Carlton was a very efficient one. They were great going inside 50, and when the game really mattered in that fourth term, they did win those important centre clearances. Liberatore was brilliant. Artie Jones down forward, Bailey Smith, he's starting to get into a bit of form as well with Treloar out of the team. And the defence has been chipping away quite nicely, but still, the problem that the Bulldogs face is, I swear, every game they always have that surge where they give up 5 or 6 goals and they sort of switch off a bit. That's the thing that I don't like about the Bulldogs. And there you got the Crows who, they're on fire, and you look at their losses still, Adelaide, and these are games that they really could have won. They've been either very inaccurate or they've just, choked, I guess you could say, against the Giants, Collingwood, etc. They could be a team that's probably sitting in the top 4 at the moment. Their forward half is just so exciting. Just their method, how they go inside 50. Taylor Walker's in brilliant form. They're just a very accountable side. They play with just great intensity around the ball. Really impressive team, and I'm just liking the way the Crows are going. And look, you don't want to tip too much off form. You don't know what to expect. I feel like the Bulldogs probably do win this game given that it's at home, and we are sort of sceptical on how the Crows will fare interstate. But I'll back in Adelaide here. I'm liking the way they are playing their footy. They've been brilliant when going forward. And the Bulldogs, they still have inconsistencies, I think, when defending transition. They do give up surges. But I think this could be a bit of a high-scoring game. Going to be a great game in the midfield. But I think the Crows will get the edge over the Bulldogs here, and they'll pick up a win in Ballarat and keep their place in the 8. We'll go the Crows to win a close one. 10 points. Next game here, we've got the Dockers taking on the Cats at Optus Stadium. The Freo Dockers, very impressive win last week against the Sydney Swans. Yes, the Swans have their outs, but you're starting to see a bit of form now, especially Luke Jackson. His past fortnight's been brilliant. We're starting to see that athleticism he can really show, and he can kick some awesome goals. He kicked a few really nice ones last week. Darcy was dominant. Tracy and Jai Miss were fantastic. Pearce, one of his best games probably so far this year. So they're coming back home with some confidence against the Cats, who are depleted at the moment. They were pretty ordinary, I guess you could say, against the Tigers. Still, if they convert their chances, they probably would have won that game. Really quiet games from Hawkins and Cameron. Usually those are the sorts of plays that, if the Cats want to win, they need to turn up. No Dangerfield, no Stanley. A lot of their defensive half plays are still out, the Cats, and that is what's really hurting them in the moment. So I feel like if you're a Geelong supporter, I can understand the pessimism here. But against the Dockers, where, look, it was a great win, but how much do you take from it just with that just one really solid win? Will they continue their surge here against the Cats? I still feel like Geelong are the better side heading into this game. But Freo's defence was really good, and they were really good in the centre clearances, where the Cats, look, they were quite good against the Tigers, so I feel like this could be a pretty good contested game. Maybe whoever wins the midfield does go on to win this game. I actually am really liking the Dogs at home to pick up the upset here, but for me and the Cats, just with how they have been going so far this year, they're just a team with quite a bit of upside. Really could have converted their chances against the Tigers last week, and I feel like if they can hit the scoreboard well this week, they should win against the Dockers, who are just always inconsistent with their defence and etc. So, I like the Dockers, but I'll back in the Cats. Go the safe tip away. Geelong pick it up. And, oh, look, it probably will be close, but I feel like Geelong will flex their muscles in the end and pick up a good win in the West, and they'll win by 24 points. Next game here, we've got the Q Clash, the Brisbane Lions taking on the Gold Coast Suns at the Gabba. A lot of people will probably be doing the quick tip here with the Lions, but as I've been saying on the channel this year, I'm really liking the Suns. And if you look at the ladder positions, if you've looked at the games they've lost, games where they've been in, they seriously could be sitting in the top 8 at the moment. And their contested game, their clearance game, their pressure has been really good so far this year. They've just lacked a lot of polish, and probably a few of their ball skills have been quite ordinary at times, which has cost them games. And they can have periods where they do switch off and lose intensity and give up surges of goals. And against the Lions, who are probably, maybe you could argue, the second best team at the moment, slightly over the Demons, they are unstoppable at the Gabba. But this game last year, I felt the Suns played a really good brand against Brisbane, so it's certainly not against them to pick up the upset here. If the Suns can really execute, which I think's probably been their weakness this year, but they can continue to be strong in the clearances and the centre bounces, I feel like they're a really good chance to pick up the upset here. But the Lions at home at the Gabba, I am liking them, and they're probably just a bit of a better team on paper. They're flying in their forward half. Defence has been quite better and some pretty good form as of late. So I feel the Suns maybe at halftime or three-quarter time, they could be in the lead, but this is a sort of game where I think the Lions, maybe in the fourth term, they kick the last 3 or 4 and they surge home and pick up another Q Clash victory here. The Lions will pick up this win, and they'll win by 13 points. And for the final Saturday night game here, the Dreamtime game at the G. Always a classic one here. The Dons taking on the Richmond Tigers at the MCG, of course. Now, this is probably always an annual game where the Tigers do get a bit of a big win against the Dons. I swear, all these games is just Richmond winning big. But Essendon, they've been pretty competitive this year. I feel like they've been a lot more of an accountable side. They've been very good with their pressure. I feel like they've been better in the contested game, and they're sort of now a side this year, the Dons, where they're probably a bit more better mentally. Like, you have to really grind them down to pick up a big win. That's sort of what the Lions did. They really had to push them over. They eventually won convincingly. And for the Tigers, well, their brand was back last week. It was fantastic. Their pressure off the turnover, their turnover game was brilliant, and they managed to hit the scoreboard very well. If they can continue that, I think they can get a big number here on the Dons. I'm pretty sure Ridley and Kelly will be back for the Bombers, which are huge ins. They really do need a bit of reinforcements down there in defence. Darcy Parish is quite a bit of a huge out, so it's big games for like Setterfield and Jake Stringer being thrown in the midfield and Archie Perkins, etc. to really get the ball forward for the Dons. Essendon, again, I think they can continue to be very competitive, but do I back him in for big tips here against the Tigers and a few of the top sort of high-respected rated teams? I'm not too sure yet. Look, I just think with the Tigers, with the brand they played last week, if they continue to execute that sort of game style, they can be a team that can start to pick up a few wins in a row. And they have been competitive, especially against some good sides. So I do back in Richmond here to pick up the win. The old annual Dreamtime game. So yeah, Tigers get up. Probably a close game of footy, but then the Tigers run away with it. We'll go Richmond to pick up the win by 19 points. Now for the Sunday games, the Riley Reid Cup at UCATT Stadium, the Hawks versus the West Coast Eagles. Now I think probably West Coast is the worst performing team in the competition at the moment, even though Hawthorn are last. Probably the big difference between West Coast and Hawthorn is West Coast completely uncompetitive for a full four-quarter performance, whilst the Hawks maybe a bit of a better team on paper, and they've been able to show some good cohesion and some good surges for a quarter or two where they can beat an opponent. Also, you know, they only went down by 11 points in the second term, I think, against the Demons. In that third quarter, geez, they really turned it up and made it a bit of an interesting game, even though they still were down by 6 or 7 goals. So, yeah, I just think right off the bat, considering as well that the Hawks play really well at UCATT Stadium down in Launceston, not Launceston, it's Launceston, that's what people tell me. I'll start pronouncing it correctly. I just think the Hawks are too good here. West Coast, very competitive, maybe for a quarter or two. They can show what they did at the start of the year, play well for a quarter or two, really give it up to them, because that's what they have been pretty respectable at, the Eagles, but I can't be tipping them to pick up a win here, unfortunately. I think the Hawks, better team on paper. They get it done at home when they play their good footy at UTAS. Hawks pick up the win. Maybe a bit of a scrappy game, but yeah, Hawthorn will be too good in the end. We'll go the Hawks by 21 points. And the old classic rivalry awaits us again. The Carlton Football Club versus the Collingwood Magpies at the MCG. Oh, Jesus Christ. Now, these are one of the games where you can't look at form. You can't look at how a team's going and the other. Yes, the Pies are flying. The Carlton Footy Club ain't, but you can't just say, oh, the Pies are going to necessarily win by 60 points. Doesn't work with these games. Both clubs will turn up to play. It's going to be close. That's just what I'm going to be saying straight off the bat here. Collingwood, yes, their stats haven't really gone into much favour. They're not really a team that's bossing in multiple areas, but just their adaptiveness to their game style and just their cohesion, and they play with such pace. Such an exciting team to watch. A team that's high on confidence and synergy. They're an easy tip here, you do think, but the Blues, they're in a bit of strife here. They've got some really tough opponents. This is a chance for them to lose 3 in a row if they do drop this game. It was a bit of a same old last week. I thought their method was really poor. Their inside 50 execution was terrible, but just given their list, the Blues, and I feel like for a quarter or two, they've seemed to play good footy. If they can play like they did in that fourth quarter against the Bulldogs, where they just are fearless, they're very good with their entries, they just play with a lot more confidence. I feel like this is the game where they can really get up for. As I've been saying as of late, I'm still waiting for the Blues. I think they're due for one of those games where they just get things clicking. You know, 𝐼𝐵𝐿𝐼𝐿𝐼, 𝗏𝐼 against a good quality side, they can go big. 𝐼𝐶𝐼𝐿𝐼 can be big in the midfield, and a few of their role players can really play their part. I think their defence as of late has been pretty ordinary. It's been pretty shaky. So yeah, both teams turn up. Coin flip game, but I'm going to stick with the Pies. I've been doing this all the time with these close 50-50 games, but yeah, I'm just going to continue pretty much tipping Collingwood. I think this game will be under a kick. Maybe another classic Collingwood comeback, who knows. They're the best team in the competition at the moment, I do feel, by a little bit of a margin, especially at the MCG. Pies pick up a close one here, 50-50 game. Collingwood by 4 points. And for the final game here, the Giants taking on the Saints at Giants Stadium. Big danger game here for St Kilda. They head into this game as the favourites, only very slightly. But yeah, the Giants, look, maybe this is their chance to strike big here at home against the Saints, who were pretty dismal last week. Their defensive structure really fell apart. They were terrible with their ball use. Going inside 50, they were quite poor too. And I just think the Giants are very underrated in a few areas. I think they're a team that can really execute when they're up and about, especially with their effort too. So I feel like this is a game where they will turn up. I think the contested game will be pretty strong. And this is just sort of a situation, again, with the Saints. They were 8-3 last year. I think they are 8-3 now this year. So is this the turning point? If they drop this game, does their downfall start? Has their downfall already started? It's a much needed game here. And just because I'm really liking them this year, I think they're going to be a team that's going to be better on the long run compared from last year, just given their staff and sort of players returning. I think Max King is back in the side this week, so that's going to be a huge addition. Pretty sure Jack Steele will be out injured, so it's a big opportunity for someone like 𝐼𝐵𝐿𝐼𝐿𝐼, who was really good in the VFL the previous week, to come in and try and earn a spot. Big game for Crouch in there too, and Ross. And the big one for the Giants, Toby Green, probably most likely will return. So he is, of course, a proven game changer. And I think with the Saints' #1 defense, they got to be more tighter on a few of those Giants forwards. They can really get loose. Also, like Jesse Hogan, he can go big if he's not contained well enough. The Giants will be competitive. They'll turn up. But look, I think they are good enough for the win. But for me, the Saints, I think they just play really good footy in this one. I feel like this game, they know they need to win. And against the Giants, look, that can have their moments. They can be pretty poor with turnover. I just think the Saints get this much needed win here. Probably going to be a bit better when going forward and really turn up with their deservedly #1 defense overall from this year. So they bounce back the Saints. They pick up this much needed win and they'll get it done by maybe a close game throughout. But the Saints pick up a classic one on the road and they'll win by 14 points. So everyone, there were my tips for round 10 of the 2023 AFL season. Thank you very much for tuning in. Feel free to comment down below and let me know what you think of my tips, and also feel free to comment down your tips below too. Love to hear every one of your people's thoughts. Once again, everyone, that is the end of today's video, and until next time, I will talk to you later. See you later, fellas.